Welcome to this session. This is, of course, you've done some of these before. So this is our Lunch and Learn, which, as those who are watching already know, these are opportunities for our sponsors to share some information, tell you a little bit more about their offerings and their business and how they can help you on the Great Loop. So Michael, I think your plan was to use this time basically as an open Q&A and answer questions that our attendees have about boat buying and the boat buying process, correct?
Yeah, I can do that. Or if we know roughly if the majority of people are looking for boats, then that would be a good topic. If most people have their boats, we could talk about other things. But, that's a great place to start, and we'll just, we can see where the questions go.
Yeah, and I should mention that Michael is also a gold looper. So he's also got some, obviously firsthand knowledge of the Great Loop and the types of things that you'll experience out there. We have one person who's mentioned that they are looking. The event itself is kind of a pretty good combination of people who are still looking for their boat and people who have it. We've got another comment that they're still looking. So, obviously everyone will take your questions through the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and ask Michael directly. But Michael, if you could start off, we know it's a challenging boat buyer's market right now. It's kind of considered a seller's market because the inventory of boats for sale is very low. So, maybe you can kind of start with an overview of where things stand today and how challenging it might be to find the right boat for the Great Loop.
Okay. It is a challenging market. There's no doubt about that. And for a number of different reasons, but most of them circle back to the pandemic. The two primary objectives that we're having, or hurdles that we're trying to get over these days, are insurance pre-approval, not financing pre-approval as we usually do, but insurance pre-approval, and lack of inventory. When people found out that boating was a great way to social distance, they went out and bought everything that they could possibly buy. And then the insurance companies followed by giving all kinds of insurance policies out. I've heard different reasons why insurance has gotten so tough. Everything from, paying claims that on these newer boaters to workforce to other things. So, but regardless of whether or not, whatever the case may be, getting pre-approved for insurance is one of the top things that I do with my looping clients right off the bat. They have seemed to be easing up on the insurance requirements recently. I've had a couple of clients who have contacted AGLCA sponsored insurance brokers, and with minimal ownership or experience on boats, and they were approved to different ages and different lengths of boat and different prices of boats. So rather than just saying, no, you're not approved, they're at least giving us some parameters now to work within. So what we have been seeing is that below $200,000, newer than the year 2000, and less than 40 feet. And that's typically against somebody who has only owned something up to maybe a center console or a bow rider or a pontoon boat. They've been typically going over about 15 feet over your last owned boat. That doesn't mean that, if you want a 50-footer and you only owned a 20-footer, that you can't find the insurance for that. It's just going to become much tougher. And it may be way more expensive. You may have to go to somebody like Lloyd's of London in order to get insurance, which will definitely be more expensive. The other side of the equation that we're working on is inventory. There is definitely not a lot of inventory out there right now. The people, specifically to loopers, the people who bought their boat and were going to loop and didn't because of the pandemic are now looking to complete that journey or in the next year or two. So they're not selling their boats. So that's, one area that we're not seeing the turnover like we typically do. The other is that we haven't started to see the turnover from the pandemic buyers yet on their boats. No idea when that may happen. It may happen towards the fall when they realize that they have to pay to put them in storage or whatever the case may be, or they're done using them or the pandemic lightens up, whatever the case may be. We just haven't seen that yet. We really don't have any idea of when that will happen. We're hopeful as soon as possible. Some of the things that we have been needing to do over the last 3, 4, 5 years, just because it has been such an aggressive market, is that we do have to put boats under contract with a personal inspection contingency, which means that you haven't seen the boat yet, but that personal inspection contingency protects you. Number one, if you know the type of boat you're looking for, that helps. Obviously, if you've been on boats and you know what you're comfortable with, then that helps. If you still need to get on boats, that's where it becomes quite challenging.
Yeah, let me ask you a follow-up on that, if I could, Michael, because there's been a lot of chatter out there, and you're going to be on the spot a little bit today. There's been some chatter out there, people, expressing some displeasure with brokers who might be expecting them to put down some money sight unseen, and of course, we're not hearing the caveat to that. It's with a personal inspection guarantee. Is that the right word?
Contingency.
Contingency. Thank you. So, explain, like, in the barest bones of details to those of us not familiar with the process, what does that mean? And are you completely safe if for any reason you get aboard that boat and don't like it? And the reason that's happening is because the boats are selling so fast that if folks are taking the time to travel to go see a boat that's not local, by the time they make those plans and get there, there's probably somebody else who has put in an offer, whether it's sight unseen or not. So can you just kind of explain, I guess I just did explain why that's happening, but tell us how safe you are putting money up on a boat you haven't set foot on yet.
Sure. And again, it really goes back to a couple of different levels of your own personal comfort. Again, if you know the boat you're after, or 1 or 2 different makes and models, that makes it much easier to know that you're comfortable on those boats. But if you're not, still seeing a boat is the hardest part right now. But the majority of boats, I shouldn't even say majority, a large number of boats are being sold before they're even making the market. I have people obviously who are looking for a specific boat, and then I have sellers coming to me saying, I have a boat that I'm going to be putting for sale, and I just matched the two up. That is happening outside of just Curtis Stokes. Obviously, every broker has clients looking for boats, and they have boats coming in. The problem is once they meet the market, or once they're on the market, they're being inundated by calls and people wanting to see those boats immediately. So that's where we get into making an offer on a boat sight unseen. Again, if you're comfortable with it, it's a little bit easier, but it's not always the easiest way. But making the offer sight unseen, and making sure that in the contingencies you add a personal inspection contingency. And I've been putting in dates against that personal inspection contingency to try and show buyers that sellers that we are moving as quickly as possible, so that we aren't taking their boats off the market. Because once they accept our offer, their boat is effectively off the market until you either complete the deal or reject the boat. With a personal inspection contingency, it's basically just changing the process, putting cart in front of the horse. Typically, we go to see the boat first, and then once you've seen the boat and are comfortable with its quality or comfort level, we make an offer. In this case, we're doing just the opposite. We're making the offer first. We're putting the personal inspection contingency in there. We still have to have the deposit come in before we, move forward. So you're still going through all the same processes. You're just seeing the boat after you've negotiated the offer. With the personal inspection contingency, we arrive on a boat. It smells, it's too small, too big, whatever the case may be. Floor squeak, there really is no level of, what you can be offended by or not like about the boat, that you can basically just say, because of the personal inspection, we are rejecting this boat and walking away. It goes right back on the market for the seller. If their broker is smart, they've got backup offers, in hand already for the next buyer. But it just gives you that little bit of time and I say a little bit of time, it could be several days to a week to just take a breath and be able to get to the boat to see it.
So that's really helpful. You touched upon this, but you would recommend using this strategy for folks who are far enough in the process that they have a pretty decent idea of what boat they want, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, this isn't, if you're not sure between a motor yacht or a tug or a trawler, then this strategy is not for you. You need to get aboard some boats first. So
it really comes to your desperation level. If you really don't care what boat you get, whether it's a tug or a motor yacht or a trawler, this will work for you. It's just you have to understand what you're going into at the onset. What we don't want to do is we don't want to tie up every boat that's out there with a personal inspection contingency just so you can get on board boats. You've got to be ready to buy a boat to do that. The one thing, and I know my own looper clients don't have a problem with this. I hope that most loopers don't have a problem with this, but what I'm telling a lot of people is to use Nebo. And when you're traveling around and you're looking and there's a looper's boat that's nearby, go introduce yourself. If you need to get on a boat, that's probably one of the best ways right now to get on a boat. Most loopers are very proud of their boats and are very eager to show off their boats. So, go and talk to other loopers, and that'll probably lead to you seeing their boat. And that is one way right now that we can use this association to be able to work on what boats we really would like to buy.
Yeah, we've got lots of questions coming in for you. I do want to take that opportunity that Michael just put out there for boarding boats to mention the event coming up in St. Michael's, Maryland, that Curtis Stokes is hosting. It's an AGLCA event where we're trying to put together a fairly small looper crawl, which is where the boats that attend open up and let others tour. And part of the reason that we're doing this is because without AGLCA rendezvous for a year and a half now, our association in particular has been pretty devoid of opportunities to get lots of the boats together and let others tour them. So that is coming up May 26th or 26th in St. Michael's, Maryland. Members are welcome. It's a free event. If you have a boat in that area and want to tie it up there and let others tour it, Curtis Stokes and Associates is actually subsidizing the dockage. So definitely look into that. A couple of questions related to this whole putting that money down, putting in the offer with a personal inspection contingency. First question related to that. Do you get the full deposit back if you walk away?
Absolutely. When we do a personal inspection contingency, a couple things just to know so that you feel a little bit more, hopefully feel a little bit more comfortable. When you send your deposit, that goes to our escrow account. The only person within our organization that can do anything to that money is Curtis Stokes. He will not even pay out on a closing unless I have your written permission, email typically, written permission to pay the seller the funds. If I don't turn that in at the time of closing, your money's still stuck in our escrow account. He is the only person that will move that money. If you do a personal inspection contingency, we get on board the boat. It's absolutely not what you like. You basically reject the boat, and at that time we can do one of two things. If we're still working together, if you still want to continue to try and find a boat, leave the money in the escrow account. It's safe. It won't cost you fees to send it back and forth. It's just an easy way of doing things. If you're uncomfortable with that, we will send you a wire distribution form to fill out, and we will wire those funds back to your account. Yeah.
So it's not a matter of trying to get that money back from the seller. It never actually reaches the seller. So I think that'll make some folks a little bit more comfortable. And that's of course a bonus to working with a broker instead of going, directly to a seller, is that you're getting that extra protection. Also related, there's two questions that I think are essentially asking the same question. We're all a little bit more familiar with contingencies based on the sea trial, the survey results, the haul out. So is there a second contingency then, a second point where the buyer has the option to say, this isn't what I was signing up for, I'm out? Or does that go away because we've had the first contingency on the personal inspection?
The personal inspection contingency just allows you to, like I said, take that breath and take some time to get to see the boat before it's sold out from under you. After that personal inspection contingency, the rest of the deal transpires like a typical deal. We schedule the survey and sea trial. We complete the survey and sea trial. We get the reports back. We get the oil analysis back. At that point, if something failed in the and it's not pass fail, but if the boat did not meet your satisfaction during the sea trial, even if it's too loud, even if it's too tippy, whatever the case may be, you can still reject that boat after survey and sea trial. And you get your full refund back, or your deposit back. The only time where you will not get your deposit back is if you say, yes, I accept the boat after survey and sea trial, and then you get cold feet and back out. You've then committed, by contract, you've committed to buying the boat, and the deposit would be sent to the seller at that point.
Okay.
But otherwise, yes, you can get your deposit back further down the process. Keep in mind, though, that surveying the types of boats that typical loopers are buying between the 40 and 60 foot range, you're paying about $10 a foot to haul that boat during survey, and you're paying roughly about $20 per surveyor. And I always recommend 2 surveyors, one for the hull and one for the engine, for that event. So you're invested $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 at that point. So you want to make sure that you're going after a boat that you're truly wanting to buy.
Okay. Couple questions about the amount of the deposit that's typical. Is that a percentage of the purchase price?
That is correct. It's 10% of the purchase price, and that purchase price isn't concrete until we have a signed offer. So if you make an offer, I get this quite regularly. I've made a $150,000 offer. Where do I send my $15,000 check? That's not how we do it. We first have to present your offer 10 times, 9 times out of 10, there's a negotiation, and we might settle on 150, 152, 500. So now your 10% is 15,250. So the percentage is 10%, but it's not collected until after everybody's agreed to a price.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit, and this is a question coming from Michael, not you, Michael, from a Michael who's attending. He would like you to kind of address your services as a buyer's agent. So what are the services that a buyer's agent is going to perform, and how do you go about engaging a buyer's broker?
A buyer's agent is no different than in real estate, having your own agent. In a lot of the deals that I've been doing, obviously because of the pandemic and the lack of inventory, I'm acting as both buyer and seller's agent. So I'm balancing both of those sides. To find a buyer's agent, you really just want to be comfortable with somebody. You want to feel that this person has your best interest in mind, not a paycheck, not a commission. You want to make sure that the buyer broker that you select will preview boats for you, will travel to see boats for you. If they're not willing to do that, that's half of the battle of trying to find a boat and know whether that boat is worth buying or not, or pursuing at least, is to have somebody with experience that you trust get on board that boat. How do you engage a buyer's broker? We do have a buyer's broker commitment, contract, agreement, whatever you want to call it. I don't necessarily work under that agreement all the time. I'm perfectly happy just working with people on a understanding that we're working with each other, and we're making sure that we're not crossing each other in any way. So you can either sign an agreement, or you can just do a gentleman's agreement, whichever the case may be.
Explain what the actual agreement is as opposed to the general agreement. Is that committing you to buying a boat? Is it committing you to using this broker? I'm not clear on what that would be versus just working on a gentleman's agreement.
It's typically there's a start and end date. I think ours is 6 months worth of time that we basically are committing to work together. I believe that it rolls over automatically that is just an agreement between us that we're working together. I believe in our agreement that it's a 30-day out. So you basically, send, if you're not happy working with a broker and want to move off to somebody else, you send a notice that you'd like to cancel the contract agreement, and you're just out of it. It doesn't. There's no necessity to buy a boat, nothing along those lines. It's just an agreement that we're working together. And the reason that came around, just so everybody understands, there was a point in time in the market where people were, they knew that we traveled to see boats, and they knew that we would go and preview boats for them, and they would ask us to do this, and then they would turn around and go buy them through another broker. We're putting out all of our time and expenses to try and help find boats. So we want to make sure that people are buying those boats through us. Again, it's at our discretion whether we want to use the agreement. If you want to use the agreement, we'll sign the agreement. Completely up to you.
So it basically is agreeing for the buyer that if they buy a boat during that time period, they will buy it using a Curtis Stokes broker.
I believe even if we work together on a boat or see a boat, and then the agreement expires, that's still a boat that we brought them to. So it is still something that would be continued.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about some of the benefits of dealing with a broker. One is that you've got that extra layer of protection through things like escrow accounts. Another in this market is that often you're listing a boat, so you kind of have a heads up on what's coming to market. And another is that the broker is going to, as you said, travel to preview boats. So we have a question about how does the broker relationship work when looking at boats nationally, which I think ties into that travel, because we often have people post to the forum and ask a question like, I need a broker in Fort Myers. But particularly for brokers who specialize in the Great Loop, you don't necessarily need one in a specific area, correct? Kind of tell us how that works and how the whole travel aspect of it works.
Curtis Stokes and Associates is an international brokerage firm. We sell boats all around the world. But in regards to loopers, as it pertains to loopers, typically the international part of our business is coming inward. So we work with clients from the European Unions. We work with clients from Australia, New Zealand, even the West Coast. It's hard for people on the West Coast, especially during the pandemic, to travel to the East Coast to look at a boat to purchase. So Curtis and I are on the road nearly 100%. That's what we do. Our business is loopers, and I travel wherever the loopers need me. I've traveled to the West Coast to meet with loopers. I've traveled all over the United States to find boats for loopers. But the key part of it is that we're going to be traveling, whether it's Curtis or I, and if there's a boat that's out there that you're interested in, it's really who's closest to it. If Curtis is in Maryland and there's a boat up there that one of my clients need to see, I drop Curtis a note and say, hey, do you have time to look at this boat? Send me some photos and videos and your impression. And then he does that. And then we can at least tell you, pursue this boat, don't pursue this boat, or here's what's wrong with that boat. And I do the same for Curtis. If I'm down in Florida, he's in Maryland and he needs something done, today he was supposed to do the lunch and learn. He's on the survey today, so you're stuck with me. We just help each other out and we work with each other, pretty seamlessly. So that is, again, that's part of that relationship with a broker that you really want to feel comfortable with, that you're not just working with a Fort Myers broker that, is pretty much sticking to home and waiting for a boat that meets your criteria to come up. You want somebody who's out there looking all over the U.S. or all over the eastern half of the U.S., which is where most looper boats are, in your best interest.
Okay. Kind of following along that line, another thing that's been out there floating around is that partly because of the market or partly because of who knows what reasons, but folks have been trying to call brokers to check out a boat that they see listed and struggle to get a response. And I'm not going to ask you to address that because who knows what everybody else is doing. But we did get a question that I think might be kind of trying to find a polite way to ask that, but we had somebody ask, when working with the buyer's brokers, what is the best method of communication, email or phone? So for you or for Curtis and his other brokers, is there a preference there?
For me personally, obviously, yes, I have a preference. I can't speak to that for everybody, obviously. Um, I would say for Curtis and I think I'm safe by saying this, because we're in the car or on flights nearly constantly. The best way to get a hold of us is either by text or email, because we still get those when we're in flight specifically. On top of that, if I'm not in flight and you want to speak to me, the best way to find out if I'm not already on the phone or doing something else with a client is to text me. And then I can get back to you and say, I'll be free in an hour. I land in an hour if we really need to talk about this. If we can't do it over text or something. So me personally, digital works better just because of how my business model runs. And I think Curtis is that way. Curtis obviously picks up the phone every time he can. I try to as well. We are human, so we do need to take a shower occasionally. We do need to, sleep occasionally, but, for the most part, we don't have normal working hours. We're here for our clients.
Okay. And next question, do all sellers agree to pay the buyer's broker fees, or how does that work? Is there, do the sellers sometimes include that they won't pay a brokerage fee?
In a in a central listing agreement, what I mean by a central listing agreement, a central listing agreement is when a single broker has the contract to sell a specific boat. In that agreement, the seller is committing to paying the broker's commissions. If it is an open listing is something that perhaps a guy is trying to sell his own boat, but has some friends in the industry that he allows to put a listing up as well. It'll be listed as an open listing. That is not a guarantee that the commission will be paid. That will have to be something that will have to be discussed. In a for sale by owner agreement, I would count on not the seller not paying the commission. What I have been able to work out in a lot of my deals with for sale by owners is that they split the commission. That's a lot easier to swallow than the seller having to pay it all or the buyer have to pay it all. But again, that is something that would need to be discussed if going down that road. But a typical listing that you're going to find on Yacht World, the majority of them there are central listings, and that means that the seller will pay the commission.
Okay. Next question, is there a minimum boat price that Curtis or one of his brokers are willing to travel to look for?
Again, that's going to vary on a number of different factors. Curtis and I obviously are stretched pretty thin already. So a lot of times, if it's not always done by boat price, it's just done by, a number of different circumstances, whether it's something that's, up in heated storage in the wintertime or, just, a number of different factors. But typically what we'll try to do is hand you off to one of our local brokers in that area to help out rather than say, we can't help you at all. Obviously, when we're traveling constantly to buy boats and sell boats, we have to watch out for our expenses. There's no good businessman out there who would not watch out for their expenses, for any cost. So for me to travel, get on a plane and travel to sell a, $12,000, $15,000, $20,000 boat, it just doesn't make sense. Number one, from a time perspective, as well as from a expenses perspective. But again, we would hand you off. We have brokers all around the Great Loop. We would hand you off to one of our brokers that we trust or that we've trained to take you through the process just as well.
Okay. Next question. If we were to have a budget of say $300,000 to buy a boat, how much, and how much can be a percentage, should we figure we need to add for commission, fees, and other costs in addition to the boat buy? So the commission is actually going to be paid by the seller, so that shouldn't really factor into that budget at all, correct?
In a central listing, yes.
Okay. But so other fees and costs to buy the boat, you mentioned the survey. I don't know if in fees in this question, if they're also considering, documentation or
Right.
state registration fees or insurance. Like there's just a lot of pieces. But since you are a gold looper and have experience, both in buying your own boat and helping many others buy and sell their boats, maybe you can kind of give us a fairly quick rundown of the other things you should consider as you're budgeting.
I will do my best.
Okay.
Commission, you don't need to do that unless you're specifically going down the road of a for sale by owner. Then you do have to set aside some money to pay your broker a commission. We talked about survey and sea trial and the kind of funds that are needed to be set aside for that. The only other thing that typically comes up, and obviously travel and hotel expenses to see boats and survey boats obviously is in there as well.
For yourself, not for the broker. The broker's paying their own travel
Right.
expenses, just
The
to make
only
sure
other-
that's clear.
Yes, definitely. The only other expense that you have is the closing agent. And I cringe all the time when we go down this road and somebody is buying a $300,000 boat and then wants to not pay a closing agent to make sure that the documentation is done correctly. Typically on a 40 to 60 foot boat, a dock agent is going to charge, this includes a tender, a dock agent is going to charge typically around the $700 to $1,000 to complete all the documents. What that does is probably one of the biggest things it does an abstract of title through the U.S. Coast Guard to make sure that there are no liens against the boat you're buying. Obviously, you can, if you don't do that, you could be stuck with a lot of extra surprises. That also takes care of recertifying the boat or redocumenting the boat for the new buyer with the Coast Guard. She or a closing agent will typically do 3 bills of sale for the main vessel as well as 3 bills of sale for the tender. Each of those have to go to a different entity, and one's yours, one's hers, one's Coast Guard's, all over the place. Powers of attorney to make sure that they can sign all the documents for you that are needed, like signing the backs of tender registrations and things like that. Trying to think what else there is. In some cases, they will register the boats for you. If it's their home state and they know the rules, real well, they'll register the boats for you in the home state and they may charge you additional for that. But closing documentation is not the place to cut corners. It really isn't. It's similar to filing your income tax. If you file it yourself, 9 times out of 10, you're more likely to get audited or have a mistake than if a accountant files it for you, because that accountant is putting their reputation on the line, basically saying that the filing is done correctly. That's very similar with a closing agent. When the Coast Guard gets a document from a closing agent, especially one that they know does a very good job, it goes through pretty quickly. If it's from a private citizen, they usually scrutinize it. So you could end up going back and forth through that process. And now you're talking about not being able to close on time. So just things to think about.
So other fees, though, things like sales tax are very dependent on where the boat was purchased, where the boat is going. So that's
You're going to go to
you're
tax.
likely will be paying that, but it's a hard thing to give you an estimate on, correct?
Yeah, tax is all over the place. It's one of the hardest things to talk about when buying a boat. If you are a resident in the state that you are buying a boat, plan on paying the state sales tax. If you are a California resident and you're buying a boat in Florida, you don't have to pay the sales tax. In a lot of cases, with specifically California, we've seen them be billed for taxes, but they just have to then prove that the boat is not in California with a marina bill or some other way of knowing that the boat's not in California. But there are numerous different ways of approaching the tax issue. You can loop without paying state tax anywhere, as long as you are keeping the boat moving and not staying in one state's time period too long to where you then owe them sales tax. You can purchase things like the sojourner's permit that allows you to be in Florida. If you purchase a boat in Florida, you have many ways of closing that boat, whether it's getting the boat out immediately. You have a 10-day period to get the boat out of the state. You can buy a 90-day tax exemption. You can buy an additional 90 days. That'll give you a total of 180 days where you're tax exempt. But on any of those cases, once you leave Florida, you can't return to Florida for, I believe it's 6 months to a year. So there's a lot of things that need to be thought about when it comes to the tax end of it.
Right. And we are actually just about out of time. We've got a few questions that are a little bit beyond the scope of this, kind of back to our insurance discussion and tax related discussion. So I apologize to those of you who are asking those questions. I'm going to just focus on the last few that are directly related to brokerage and the boat buying process. Mark is asking, are there boat inspections like when you buy a new home? Mark, that's the survey that Michael has mentioned. And Michael, you also, you mentioned the haul out as part of the survey, and there's fees for that. And then the fees for 2 surveyors, a hull and an engine survey that are essentially doing the equivalent of a home inspection on the boat. Kind of related to that.
The one thing to add to that, Kim, is the hull surveyor also does an appraisal of the boat. So they put a value on the boat of what fair market value is, rather than having a separate appraiser like you would in a real estate deal. And that comes into play if you're financing the boat. If you're financing the boat, what the number is that the surveyor assesses the boat at needs to match or be higher.
Okay. Next question. Hopefully this is one that you can answer, with a fairly succinct answer since we're out of time. But we have a member who is just having a new boat delivered. So not new to them, brand new boat. Do you recommend a full survey for somebody who's purchasing a brand new boat?
Knowing clients who have bought new boats in the past and the problems that they have encountered with new boats, yes, I would say that to get somebody on board to test everything is well worth, specifically before you void any warranties or anything like that. It would specifically be in your best interest. I've seen things such as complete battery banks that need to be replaced, generators that needed to be replaced, air conditioners not plumbed and leaking all over, a number of different things that just one hand didn't catch the other hand. So it's no different than a car or a house. There's going to be little quirks that are still there. So I would definitely recommend somebody to hire somebody on their own to go through the boat and see if there's anything they can find. Probably
good for peace of mind on that big purchase.
Yes.
And then the last question, we've talked a little bit about if you're working with a buyer's broker and you end up interested in potentially purchasing a boat that's for sale by owner. So that's the circumstance where the buyer may actually end up paying the commission for their broker. So if that winds up being the case, what is the broker's commission percentage at that point?
It still can be the full 10%. Typically what we do in that case, what I do personally is that if it's for sale by owner, there's a couple of things that have to happen in order for us to be involved in it. The actual seller of the boat has to agree to allowing us to list the boat only for that deal. So it's a one-time listing for a specific couple for a specific time period. That's a hurdle that we have to get over in order to be able to even represent you in buying a for sale by owner. That doesn't always happen. I would say it's a 50-50 that, somebody is willing to let us list their boat. That's why they're not listing their boat with a broker to begin with, is they don't want to be in a listing agreement. So it doesn't bind them to any kind of commission or anything. It's just the fact that they have to list the boat with us. I typically will discount the commission if I am just arriving into this deal and helping buyer and seller come together and doing the closing paperwork and surveying and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, if I'm listing the boat and I have to travel and I run up expenses and all that kind of stuff, we're talking about, the normal 10% commission. But when it's just 2 people meeting up, we're going through a boat that's kind of a match, we have the ability to discount the commission.
And I know we're a little bit over time, but for clarity's sake, your broker, you should expect your broker to travel with you to preview the boats, to show you the boats. But there's more involved. Most brokers should also be willing to attend the survey with
Absolutely.
you, correct?
Absolutely.
And that's all their own expense. You're paying your travel and they're paying theirs. So
Correct.
lots of questions answered. Probably many more that were not answered. So I want to invite everyone to attend tonight's session from 6:30 to 9. It's kind of an open come and go as you please, but we've got our sponsor expo hall going on virtually through Zoom, and our roundtables going on virtually through Zoom. So from 6:30 to 9, Michael and Curtis will be there, Scott and Karen will be there, the other sponsors that you've heard from during these lunch and learns and will still hear from as the event continues will be there. And we've got 4 different topics happening for the roundtables that are just kind of open Q&A sessions as well. So you should all have your Zoom links for that. Once you arrive this evening, you'll have the ability to move freely between those, what Zoom calls them breakout rooms, and we'll have them all titled appropriately so you know which ones you can find in different places. So thank you for sticking with us this afternoon. We'll see you all this evening. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to you and Curtis for your sponsorship.
Absolutely.